Perfect. There we go. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, lovely people, depending on where you zoom in from, which time zone. I have the lovely James Heppner with me today. Welcome, James. How are you?
Thanks for having me. It's wonderful to have us together, Marie. We've been on together. You were on my
Yes.
show a little while ago. Thank you about that. It was nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just about to share that. It's actually, I usually always start our interviews with how did we actually meet? And
Mm-hmm.
you and I met through this lovely platform that I've mentioned a few times before, which is called Pot Match. So it actually matches people who've got a story, a message to share. And we both obviously do. And you interviewed me on your podcast, Weekly Wins and Losses with James Heppner. And we had this amazing conversation. I'm like, I want to bring you on my show. So here we are. And I have to give a very special mention to my neighbor, Rebecca and Steve, actually, because they gave me their beautiful little study today, hence all the pictures of their kids and drawings, because my internet was so slow this morning. We live in such a small country town that it's very hit and miss, and theirs, for whatever reason, is working. So I'm like, thank you so much for having me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to come live with you. So yeah, very different background today. I'm so out of these stages with like math timetables and everything. My boys have way outgrown that. So it's quite cute being in their study up here today. James, would you do us the honor to introduce yourself to our audience, please?
Sure, absolutely. And before I do, I just want to say, what's really unique about this podcast, right? This specific one on
Yeah.
spiral grief. There you are, and we're kind of grieving. You're grieving. You thought it was going to go a certain way, and now we got this beautiful backdrop. And there you are, you're just glowing, and you're just radiating. You'd be like, and I get to be here, and you get to connect with like when your
Oh, thank you so
children
much.
were younger. So it's
The
just a fun.
light's right in my eyes, so I might have to adjust that a little bit. I don't know how I'm gonna. Yeah, let me just do that a little bit. Oh, that's so much better because it was like really blinding me. I could hardly see you. There you go. It's so funny when you're
Yeah,
in a different space. All
I
right,
know,
over
right?
to
Yeah.
you. Who is
That
James Heppner?
Who is James? James is someone that, to your play on grief, James is someone who's decided that grief and grace belong together
Yeah.
and they have a healthy relationship with one another. Perhaps without grief, there would be not much need of grace of the human. The human might not find the need, though grace is, but the human might think, well, why do I need it?
Mm.
And vice versa, right? Grace has need of grief, grief has need of grace. I am a strategist. They call me a self-help hacker. And I guess the reason I don't
Love it.
really know the actual, but I mean, I do like biohacking, but self-help hacking is there's so many things that we tend to be shown and be told, information overfed. Here are the
Yeah.
tools that will work. Here's the tools. And, I think tools have benefit
Mm.
because I think ego control has benefit. However, people typically find me when they move from having need and desire of somebody to tell them just to stop. So that's ego control, a structure saying no,
Yeah.
to people find me when they're at a space when they're like, actually, I've done a whole bunch of that work. And now I want to expand my ego container. I want to make room for. I want to stop eliminating. I want to see the purpose of grief and be able to utilize the gifts of it, the goodness of it. So I have a story. First part of my story was first part of my life. Let's say it this way: I achieved a whole bunch of success.
Mm.
Didn't realize I was stepping on a bunch of people while it was happening,
Mm.
and I was solving for myself basically. And then all of a sudden, of course, what happens? We see like you're sitting in this room and you're experiencing, whether you're seeing or not, but you're experiencing, you're somewhere different, and you have to wing it, and you're like, well, who is inside
Mm.
when how I thought it was going to go isn't working out? And it's like, for me,
Yeah.
very successful, had a lot of the finances, what I craved, what I desired, and all of a sudden it was like, actually, why do I still feel so empty? So listeners, ask yourself, where is it in your
Yeah.
life where you feel that? And so the step two of my journey was
Mm.
when I came through that. And instead of trying to eliminate things in life, I began to utilize and participate with. Anytime we eliminate things, whatever that ends up being, those
Yeah.
things are items we kick down the road, and they all come at a
Mm.
really inopportune time. So, for example, we're observing you, Marie, and there you are, and you're just flexing and flowing. And so you can see you've done the inner musculature work of accepting and onboarding and utilizing uncertainty instead
Yeah.
of deflecting against it, like your
Absolutely.
story of your husband, right? So I love that. So I am, again, I'm a strategist. They call me self-help hacker, and some people call me a coach. I don't know if I'm wise. I would say not. I'm just a human being who's done a lot of inner work, and I just love being with humans and supporting them in understanding that wins is what we want, but also a loss. And people go, ooh, isn't one good and one bad? And that's kind of oftentimes a problem. We tend to, when we reckon that there is something that we perceive as loss, or it might even be a loss, that we label that as negative and bad. And so why wouldn't we turn a bad into positive? So we become hyperbole filled. And I'm not that guy that's hyperbole. It's like a weed is a weed. If you pull it out, you pull it out. But why not let all things belong? Like in this economy, in this universe of love, everything belongs. So I found a way to build my life structure on now how it belongs, how it's included, and how it serves for a purpose. Meaning the pains that I had serves for everything, serves for a purpose. So I have an unshakable love and appreciation with life. I used to be very expectant of life and used to think reality needed to shape around me and harmonize around me. And I flipped the deck a little bit. It was hard because I used to want it different than what it was.
Before
and now
we
it's
go
like,
any further there, James, I want to highlight something that you said. I want to pick out a key word that really chimed out for me, and that is the participate. Because to participate, it takes a choice. It really takes a choice to participate in life and in whatever choices you take. And what you said so nicely, I really want to highlight that. And it might not have felt nicely back then, but what you said so nicely is that I was successful and I had all the finances and all the financial success that you can ask for, but, and there's always the but, I still felt that emptiness. And I think that is something that a lot of people are listening to this might relate to also in the space of grief, when you feel like I've done all this and I've done all that, and I'm focusing on choices that I make and things that I do, and I participate in life a bit more, yet I still feel this emptiness. And I believe that it takes a recognition of that emptiness to actually be able to do something about that. And when you said to participate, I think that is a real key word here, to actually choose to be part of that, to be part of something, and to also find your purpose in all of that. Purpose is such a word that is thrown around quite easily these days, yet it has such importance in the field of healing, in the field of creating a life that is really worth living. So how did your journey take you through that? Because I understand that you have done that work, that you have worked through that. And I love the life hacker. It's was it life hacker that you said?
a self-help hacker, right?
Self-help. Yeah, of course. I thought, no, that doesn't seem right. Yeah, self-help hacker. It's such a cool term for what you do. So tell us a bit of your journey through that valley of, emptiness, and finding your way back to what actually fulfills you, what makes you happy.
Well, let's say it like this, right? Who doesn't want to live fully alive? I think we all have that desire.
Yeah.
We all have that craving. We all know that it's possible. And often, if we're not careful, we believe that it's out there somewhere. We seek it. We seek it in people. We seek it in books. We seek it in so many constructs. And sometimes constructs work. However, eventually, if we're not careful, we have so many contraptions on our body, we can't even walk around anymore. And so it's like this, right? So when I checked out of life, and literally when I checked out, I checked out. I didn't want to kill myself, but I didn't want to be here. So I found a way to successfully sleep 18 and a half hours a day for 2.5 years.
Wow.
And so what did I do? I tried to deflect against grief, not embrace it. The neat thing is grace and grief, they have need of each other. But what's really neat is that grief allows us to experience a full dimension of living. You see, grief brings us to the feeling of sadness. And why is sadness not safe? You see, if we're invited to participate with something that feels sad, that doesn't mean to turn it into non-sad, because why is sad bad? Sad is sad. Ask yourself, if you go to a funeral, the person who we're burying or the ashes that are being spread, we wish that person was here. And what makes that person here is that the person can feel and experience all of life. Some people, it works to feel in about this size gap. They feel little. They wonder why. They feel little, they can bring little, they can experience little. Why is it? Because you've made a very small container of emotions available to yourself. However, when you make safe what you once thought wasn't needed and wasn't wanted, then all of a sudden it's like, actually, grief is the answer. Just like grace is the answer too. But grief is the answer for the moment, to participate. All I can tell you is when I got the news that my son was diagnosed with high functioning autism, When I got the news, I had been hand selected by the Canadian government for audit, and I had to pay several $100,000, of which the money I had, I just didn't want to pay.
Yeah.
Resist it. All I
Sure.
happened to know is I had many things that I could participate with,
Mm-hmm.
but I chose to say, well, I would rather want to resist. And living in a world where we reject, where we resist, and where we judge, a little acronym, RAJ, R-A-J, living with resistance,
Mm-hmm.
non-acceptance,
Mm-hmm.
and a judgmental world is going to throw you into very unhelpful toiling. And you're
Yeah.
never going to get out of that cycle. You're going to constantly empathize with the problem versus the possibility, right? And so I think at the end of the day, I think just to really make simple, because that's what I'm all about. I love nuance work. That's what I do. But let's be honest, I don't do nuance work so as to complicate. I do nuance work so as to help the human spirit to really understand what it looks like to simply on board. And so here's the play. Think about this. Right now, you've been given the opportunity, Marie, there you are, your internet, you had some issue at your place, you found another place. You get to participate with that unique thing.
Mm-hmm.
What I got to participate with is I thought I had 45 minutes to an hour. Now I got 30 minutes, right? And so what exactly? We get to realize that what are we going to trust?
How are we gonna squeeze the message into 30 minutes now?
Right? And how can we trust that we're going to be valuable? How can we trust the internet's going to work? How can we trust and enjoy that instead of it going the way we want it to? See, human beings actually trust what they can't see more than what they can see.
Yeah.
We actually trust mystery more than what we can touch, feel, see, or hear. The reason for it being is that it offers us such depth of connection that goes beyond building on a construct. It brings us into a place of uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
Uncertainty, which is the knowing and the unknowing folding together in one. So participation for me is literally like this. When I was in the depth of my story, I was invited to participate with James. This is how it is. I had the money to pay, for example, on the audit, I had the money to pay.
Mm-hmm.
I had the invitation to participate with it and make easy for my wife, saying, we have the money, baby, don't worry. But what I told her is, I don't think we have enough. So look at these things. We begin to share lies. And you know what? Until the day that actually I exited that story, which is 2.5 years later, she was constantly under the impression that we didn't have the money. We'd borrowed it someplace. No, I paid it with the money that I had.
Yeah.
So when we participate, we're truth tellers. Why is the bad news what we're given? Why is it not something that we can trust and build on? There's so much playfulness. Like, who doesn't want to return to the sandbox of life?
Yeah.
We can create stories where we're going to have to forgive ourselves for all of the regrets that we have in our world.
Yeah.
Or what we can do is we can stop writing that that unhelpful story. Go ahead.
I think
Sorry.
that's another really important thing, the playfulness, like I feel that once we grow up, we do need reminders how important playfulness is in our life, because things get so serious and you grow up and you need to become the provider. And, in particular, when Rob died, I really stepped into this role of I'm the sole provider now, and I'm the protector of the family, lots of masculine energy, lots of seriousness. And not that I'm saying, seriousness and masculinity is one, yet it was really in that role of I have to. And I needed to turn it around for me. So I played a lot with that I choose to, and it became softer and it became more fun, and it became this feeling of I want this. I want to create this for my boys. I want to be this person for my boys. And I think once we remind ourselves of the choices that we have and bring the playfulness back into it, it becomes so much lighter. And what you said before, I really want to highlight that too, is simplicity. I love simplicity. Often we really tend to overcomplicate things as human beings quite often, and to remind ourselves of that and to really simplify things. And I love that you say that, you do that to make it more simple, to make it easier for people. And that with playfulness, I think they are really amazing tools that we can all remind ourselves a little bit more and use them a lot more.
I love that. For what you just said, in my heart, it just nudged me to to bring this to the surface. You know, a crisis, if we tell truth,
Mm.
and you know this because you've lived this, and I know this about you, but listeners, think about this. A crisis is both danger and opportunity at the same time.
Mm. Yeah.
It is both. It is both and. It's like not grief or
I
grace. It's
absolutely
both
love that.
grief.
Yeah,
It's
you can
both
actually
grief
Google
and
that when
grace.
you look up crisis,
Right.
it really is
Right.
incredible that and when I first read that, and it was a couple of years ago, but it wasn't, ages ago. But when I first read that, that opportunity is part of that description, what the word crisis actually means. I thought this is so spot on. And this is what I often talk about in the work that I do, to see the opportunity in grief, to see the opportunity in what we can actually do, the choices that we do have. Because so often people, when there is a significant loss in their life, they feel like all the power has been taken off me, everything has been taken off me, the power of decision. This was not my decision. Well, no, but it's your decision what you do with it, how you respond to it. There are so many choices that people are not aware of immediately after a loss. And I consider myself very lucky. I actually just wrote an article about that. I consider myself lucky that I had these tools to work with it. And these, to me, were gifts from my dad's passing. When my dad passed, I was not equipped at all to deal with this loss at all. I had no idea what to do with it. Yet one thing that I learned from it is to really not ever leave anything unsaid. When somebody means something to me, I tell them. When a person walks past with a beautiful smile, I'll tell them. I talk to strangers all the time because I think it's important that they know, or I love that. It might not be important, yet we often underestimate what impact our words, our thoughts, our feelings can have on other people. And so often we keep them to ourselves rather than just sharing them. And it takes practice, and it takes a little bit of, getting over what if they don't want to hear it, or am I bothering people? I'm like, well, how about we change our thinking around how will that impact them on a positive note? How will that make them feel? Is that going to put a smile on their faces? And if the answer could be yes, just do it and see what happens. I know I'm sidetracking now, but it all came from that, crisis.
Love it. I love
I
it.
do love it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think something that comes to heart for me is we all know that we apparently crave transformation, but in order to transform, we have to integrate. So some people say, well, listen, I don't want to do grief. I just want to do grace, or I just want grace. I don't want grief. And what's really interesting, thinking about years ago, Bruce Springsteen was behind the stage, and in the green room, the band that was going to lead for him come on and play just before he stepped on stage was in that space. And they asked him, they looked over and their knees were shaking and they were going to open up for Bruce Springsteen. It's a pretty big deal. And they looked over and they said, Bruce, yeah, right. And then Bruce says, hey, what's the problem? And they go, oh my goodness, we wish we were like you. And he says, what do you mean? And they said, look at our knees, look at this is silly. We're so nervous. And he said, so they perceive danger. Listen, danger is fine, but opportunity is also fine. And he looked at him and he said, listen, kids, listen, guys, basically, he said, do you understand when I enter the stage, my knees still knock? And they said, you? He said, back in the day, I used to think this is the most horrible thing. And I was like, danger, danger, danger. But he goes, now I see both danger and opportunity. He goes, oh, you know what I tell myself when my knees knock? I tell myself, I'm ready. This reveals I'm ready. I'm feeling it. I'm like vibing. I can't wait to get out there and go. You know, what's so fascinating is if we just choose one over the other, we have to do both. And if we do one over the other, it leads to self-protection. And self-protection always leads to mediocrity.
I just had the funniest thought when you said that, the shaking knees and Bruce Springsteen. I'm like, I wonder if that brought on Elvis Presley's funny dance style. Who knows? Theory.
Yeah, I know, right? I know.
Awesome. So bring us back to your journey, James. When we said, what brought you through the valley? What brought you through? So obviously, looking at life as in, or crisis as in there is opportunity in that. Where did you get those tools from? How did you get to be on that path of making these choices and changing your mindset around how you actually look at it and how you see opportunity in all of that? Because that, I think, is the real key point here for a lot of people watching this that might not have made that transition yet.
Well, let's just say it this way. I spent those 2.5 years of trying to force myself to check out a life, I spent those years trying to eliminate things. And after about 2 years, it dawned on me, you know how it is. I didn't see family. I didn't go out really at all. It dawned on me that this elimination thing wasn't really working. It took me that long. I was pretty stubborn, I guess, right? And so, and so, right, it's like to the point on participation. This is why I'm so eagerly and hyper vigilantly, like always checking with myself, am I choosing to participate? Because the good news is that what's in front of me is actually what I want. I had somebody years ago tell me in the midst of my story saying, you know, if you really deduce or reduce personal development down to simple words, it's like this. If you can start wanting what you have, want what you have. It's like when your husband, Rob, when you can want how it is, what does that look like? And so, sure, there are times in life when there's the Hitlers or whatever, like, do we like that? No. But at first you must say, I want this because I want to see what I'm not seeing. I want to understand. I want to connect with. I want to be of benefit. I want to not exclude. And so here's the thing. I chose for 2 years to not want the unwanted, to not take the need of the old unneeded. I'm like, no, this is dangerous. This is dangerous. Finally, when you say this is dangerous, dangerous, dangerous too long, just like those boys in the green room, you realize somebody else comes along and maybe you're ready to get pierced. I was pierced for something different. And I chose to say, listen, how would I get comfortable with something that I once didn't want and didn't need? And how about now I claim new want and new need for inclusion? You know, oftentimes what we want is we want to have the exploding upward force. We want to have the outward exploding, for men especially, exploding outward, like we're producing, we're doing all these things, right? We're creating. But really what we want to do is we want to have both the exploding outward force and also the imploding inward force. Think about it. A human being likes to be both big and small at the same time. People go, well, there's one that I want and the other one I don't want. The truth is the feminine presence reveals this to us. The feminine presence often has a more developed inner world. And the inner world makes reason and reconciles that in relation to life, the big picture, I'm small. And when I'm small, I get to feel big. And when I get to feel big, I get to feel small. So these two coalesce, they build each other. So when a human walks on the earth, it feels kind of nice. There's the cricket. You're like, well, it's nice that the cricket doesn't eat me. And perhaps I can like not step on the cricket. I can take another step. I don't have to be rude to the cricket. But think about in the evening, who doesn't like to lay the back down on the grass and look up at the stars and feel small for a moment?
It's incredible.
We have a desire to explode outward and implode inward. That's the law of physics. And so for me, what happened is I just started making room for, and there's about 4 things that I did. Like, I think our job on earth is really simple. And this is what I decided to do. Number 1, be in the moment. Number 2, accept the moment. Number 3, find compassion for the moment. And number 4, process the moment. And I did none of those things before.
I love it. And it's so simple. There are really 4 simple steps that people can actually quite easily do. And it takes a decision, and it also takes somebody to just lay it before you, like you just did so nicely, and say, these are the 4 simple steps. And when people can actually write that down, journal about it, really sit with that and really allow that to infuse them, use it, participate, I think that there's so much magic in that. And those are real steps that people can easily use. So thank you so much for sharing that.
How exciting, isn't it, that we get to co-create with the greatest of intelligences of all? We get to co-create. We are created to create. The thing about growing up, it just hit me now. The thing about growing up is that you and I get to decide. And we get to decide, meaning no one else is telling us stories anymore. We are humans. We are fully adult here. Meaning we get to choose the story. And you said it, but you said it so eloquently. I have a little thing, and I was raised in a Christian tradition, and let's just say I've deconstructed my faith, and I've come back, and I do find my way to source of love through those stories, but I make room for many other, the Tao Te Ching, many other stories. They're all fantastic. But I'll say it like this. There's a story in the Bible, and I'm an amateur there, but it talks about Adam and Eve, and apparently how they wanted to be God. They wanted to decipher if it was good or bad. Think about the folly of Adam and Eve. If that story is true or not, doesn't make a difference. It's a beautiful play, metaphor, if nothing else. So God said, if you want to decide what's right or wrong, you're going to have to get out of here, meaning you're going to have to go toil in an unhelpful way. But we can stumble back into the garden anytime we like if we just start to participate with that. It's probably not helpful for us to decide if it's good or bad. It's then and now. And everything we're doing is just priming us for the next step, right? Grace is there to guide us. If I think about it, grace to guide us, grief to guide us, not one or the other, but both at the same time. When you live open-hearted, there is no need to exclude anything.
I just love what you just said, James. I really, like, for me, I just want to translate that into my words. If we were to take everything and anything that happens in our life as a guide, rather than that happened to me, because I'm a big believer, like you two are, like you are too, in this whole, life's happening for us rather than to us. And if we were to really take anything and everything that's happening in our life, including the death of my husband, to use that as a guide, because that's, at the end of the day, that was the decision that I made without thinking it through, without putting it into those words. But back then, when Rob passed, that was a decision I made, to let that be my guide. And I felt so guided on my journey. I was actually quite gobsmacked how I could feel so looked after and so guided in a journey when my husband only just died, and I was just like, somebody took me and just walked me, I was like, whoa, where's this going? Everything was happening so fast. 4 months into it, I wrote a book. 9 months into it, I started a movement. And if anybody would have told me that beforehand, I would have not seen that coming whatsoever.
Gosh, Marie, what I think, what I love most about that story is how you actually allowed the passing of Rob to lead you to the next thing. That led you as an arrow. And again, I'm an amateur in the Bible, but the stories, the Bible and the great spiritual books, they're all designed to point you. It's an arrow to the next proper action. That's all that it is. Like, gosh, I was just on a call with a client, and the client said, these were the client's words.
I've got you back. That was bizarre. I had a quick interruption in there.
Okay. But, so I just got off the phone with the client, and the client, using the narrative, and by the way, what I was just saying is that you connected with your story and you allowed that to be the piece to take you to the next part. You didn't exclude it. You participated and you made good of. So you were transitioned from grace, grief, grace. You played in that space. My client on the phone, he says to me, and we've been working together for about a year and a bit, and he says, hey, listen, I tend to think where I get it wrong. So that's an old story he has. And what's interesting is, what we often do is we say, well, that story, let's put an X through it. Let's not see the strength of it. Let's totally change it. And what I did is I just heard this and I thought to myself, well, obviously he's getting connection through that story. So how can we use that story and just nicely coax him forward? So I said, listen, instead of being like, I get it all wrong, how about we say, I now let it all belong? And he goes, oh my, and we just changed the narrative. And so I asked him, if we move from belonging, like what does, and he goes, oh, I'm so good at criticizing myself. And I said, what would be a word that would actually bring more life to it? He goes, well, I'd like to be a critic. And the critic actually seeks to understand and make room for things. So now instead of him finding a way to be totally, defensive in life, now he's got a way to accept and bring grace into the story. So I think I love that about you, that you're, that you hold grief in such a compassionate way. You're not like, just get through it. You're there with it, but you're action about it. You're like, let's keep using it. And actually what I love about your story is that your grief story never dies. There's grief in all of our life constantly. Things don't end up the way we thought they're going to end up. And I love how you stay with that. Like, you're not like, oh, I've conquered this. You're like, actually, why would we want to conquer it? Because why is it bad? It's a good thing. I love that.
But I also am a big believer, and I want to say that here so people don't misunderstand that in any way. I'm a big believer because, society always tells you, grief never dies, it will stay with you forever. I don't believe that. I do not believe that. I'm a big believer that you can heal that,
100%.
But using that, and I had this beautiful line in my head, I hope I get that out right now, when I was listening to you and you were talking about grief and grace, and I thought there's this beautiful line, like, from grief with grace to growth. That's the full, that's the full story. And I really love that. Everything
that's a beautiful
growth. If we can see anything and everything that happens in our lives as seeds that are planted, when we're planted in the right environment, it will grow. Yet we have to prepare that environment. We have to provide that environment. And if we sit in a space of nothing's going to happen, or this is bad, or, this is bad is just a judgment, because everything in life that happens just is, whether it's good or bad, comes from our judgment, from our labeling. And if we can look at everything as either neutral at worst or as an opportunity at best, then we are already in the exact same situation, but way better off looking into the future. It doesn't change the situation, but it changes our outcome. It changes the way we choose to live with it or grow through it or stay stuck in it. Everything's a choice, and not making a choice is a choice as well. That's the paradox.
Yeah. Well, and I think exactly, and I love the way you put that. So sometimes when we experience something new, and I empathize with this even in myself, when I experience something new, we tend to think it's so pervasive, it's so permanent, and it's just so of me. It's all of me, and we tend to think this is the state that we're going to be in. And so, we get it. We totally get it. Here's the thing: it's a unique thing to feel something. However, the human being has a desire for variety. The human being never wants to stay the same.
Yeah.
So if you feel stuck, listeners, if you feel a little stuck, just remember it's nudging you to embrace something a little different, a little new, not for shaming and blaming, but to make room for that experience that you had. Because let's be honest, there is constant invitation for you to embrace that it won't work out exactly the way you thought. Think about Hollywood. They present the rose and happily ever after, and the credits roll, and apparently that's the good news. You and I used to have a relationship, and even with your kids, listen, anybody who does relationship or business, things never end up exactly the way we thought. And so if we fear the loss of something, then we may as well not even try. And this is why most people don't do anything.
Yeah.
They don't take bold, courageous action because they fear that there might be a potential of a loss. Yeah. And we tend to think of it as a win and a loss. So we tend to think one's good, one's bad. Actually, it's all for gain.
That's a really good point, because people that I work with, people in my group, or also people in other grief groups, when I do my research, I am in quite a few other grief groups really for research purposes. And I'm often appalled or shocked to see how much people stay stuck in other grief groups, because all they do is talking about the grief, never about the opportunity in it, which is such a shame, and I really feel there's a huge lack for that. But yeah, I just completely lost my train of thought. That's not good. I had a point there, and I'm like, what is it? I just lost it. It'll come back to me. It's okay.
Yeah, no, and I'm picking up what you're. No, I completely understand where you're coming from. And right here in the moment, all over again. I do the same thing. Sometimes I'm going to.
It was the fear. It was the fear. The fear keeps us stuck. It completely paralyzes us. And there's so often that people talk about this fear of what if that happens again. They are so stuck in this, I lost my husband, and now I can't ever be in another relationship because I would not be able to go through that again. Well, you've done it once before. I'm not saying it's going to happen again and do it again. That's not what I'm saying. But if we live the rest of our life stuck in that fear that it could potentially happen again, we may as well not live at all. I'm not suggesting any bad things here, yet it is that whole idea of how we look at things. And again, coming back to the word crisis, if we look at it as an opportunity, or this is bad, it's our labeling, what we do with it. And that's what I wanted to make that point. This whole idea of fear, how that is really keeping us stuck, in particular in the space of grief. I've noticed that a lot. And yeah.
Gosh, I think the universe is set up so magically. And here's what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what we decide to take action through fear or through love, we'll take action. So the universe delivers connection no matter what. Walk into a restaurant, walk into a coffee shop.
Yeah.
Listen sometimes how people connect over negativity. I tried to change that narrative and it near killed me.
Yeah.
You know what I realized one day? These people are connecting with me with how they know how. And why is that the bad news? James, stop taking the good news of what they know how to do and change it. Listen, be with them there. And if they want to move, they will. If they don't, they don't. Listen, entry level action, but let's praise the action. It takes courageous action to want to connect with someone. If someone's saying the weather is horrible, that's their version of wanting to connect. And so I'm literally feeling cry on the inside. I can cry and laugh at the same time. It's so beautiful, grace and grief at the same time, and how I didn't demand that in myself earlier. I should have all these things figured out. And it's like, it invites me to being like, listen, we're all on a journey. We're all taking action towards things. And you know what? different lines of development. In some areas, I might not be doing that. In other areas, I'm still connecting entry level.
Yeah.
The good
I love
news
that.
is we get to see this constantly.
This is my favorite takeaway of our interview today. I'm going to point it out right here. It's like, even if people talk about bad weather, it might be their way to connect, you know, like, again, it becomes our opportunity to put a neutral or positive label on something that is supposed to be negative. You know, when somebody talks about bad weather, it's well, it's only us labeling it if that's something bad or not. And what you just said is such a beautiful reframe. You know, maybe it's their only way that they can connect. Maybe it's their only way how they feel they can reach out. So this is such a beautiful takeaway for me. And speaking about connection, how can people connect with you if they want to get hold of you? We will be sharing the links in the interview below as well, but can you tell us what is the best way to connect with you, James?
I'd just like to say thanks for having me on, and I just want to honor you for taking this human journey. And you, like I, and I hope us listeners, we all realize taking the right step versus a step is important. A step, and we get to participate here with it, right? And so people can find me, and so those of you, and some of you will feel the nudge, others will be like, no. And so if a nudge comes to you and you're like, I need to talk to James, I want to have a little discovery call, see what my next step would look like, just a little strategy or discovery call, no strings attached. You simply find me by going to jamesheppner.com. So it's JamesHeppner.com. And that's a simple way of finding. And of course, I do have, for all of you, I have a program, and it's actually a no charge Friday noon call, where what you get to experience is what we talked about here. We deliver. You get to voice and language a win from the week and a primary loss.
Love it.
The sting of a loss is removed when you just say, we don't turn a negative to a positive, because it was never negative to begin with. And you just say it, and the people from different parts of the world, their eyes light up. And who doesn't want to clear the deck from the week and just bring it to the surface? And it's like, why label the shame? And it's like, no, you took courageous action. We want to empathize. We want to say, good job. Listen, we want to fuel ourselves that we're ready for next week. When we go like, that might bring a loss. We're like, why is that the bad news? It's going to lead me to the next action. And so it fuels your spiral going up and up and up. So
it's so beautiful. James, just give us, because people are watching from all different time zones. When you say Friday, what time zone are we talking about, and what time?
So Friday, right. So I'm Pacific time zone. I'm Vancouver, Canada. So that's 1 o'clock Pacific.
Yeah.
And so you can go to the website and just simply go to weekly wins and losses, and you'll scroll down the page, you'll see, but that's 1 o'clock. And so what you do is just enter, and then we'll send you a link. So I just want to remind everyone, and here's what's worked for me. If this helps for you, then that's great. If not, that's great. But ask yourself, what would happen if you would adopt the belief that life owes you nothing? What would you be able to onboard with grace and participate?
Love it.
What would happen if you would say nothing has to be perfect? What would happen if you'd say everything frees me, nothing traps me? I just want to challenge all of you listeners to be in that space, because listen, life is a gift. It's short, use it well. It's yours. It's all for you. And listen, if Marie can do it, we can do it.
I love it so much. James, thank you so much. And for all of you listening out there, and you feel like, oh my God, I didn't have a pen on me, don't worry. We'll be sharing all the links in the comments below the interview, so you can get in touch with James or leave a comment, leave a question, whatever you want. We'll be back to answer all of them. And James, I cannot thank you enough for your time, for your wisdom, and for your beautiful shares today. I have taken so many golden nuggets away from me. And I hope that all the listeners did so too. And may I also say, I'm so looking forward to doing the interview with your wife. I had a beautiful connection with her. So thank you so much for connecting us. You are one lucky man, may I say that. She's gorgeous inside and out. So I can't wait to meet Meg for the interview as well. So thank you so much for being here today. And this is James and Marie signing off. Bye for now. Thank you so much.
I was honored to be on. Take care.
Thanks.